So welcome to Versus. Welcome to all the artists, Hélène, Yvette, and Louis, and thank you for your patience for these few moments. About this project is organized by 4 different art centers, galleries, and associations. We decided to collaborate in this time where we are all so much at distance, even more than ever. And we share a common interest, which is ecological thought. So already almost a year ago, we decided to create an event and invite some photographers. At the end is 4 each, who share also an interest for ecological themes. The environment is very good that we are meeting today because it's Earth Day. So it's a day dedicated to the protection of our planet. Is a good coincidence. It wasn't planned. So the 4 organizations are Fonderia 20.9 in Italy, Corpo Paco, which is us, me and my colleague Emanuela, which is an association in Montpellier. And then you have Galerie L'Aberrante, which is in Cévennes, still in France, and is at the origin. Valérie, the manager of the gallery, is at the origin of all this idea. And l'Image à Venir, which is a collective of 2 photographers, Mélanie Patrice and Natalia Neckar, in Belgium, in Bruxelles. So each of us invited 4 photographers. Hélène has been invited by the Galerie L'Aberrante, in this case, Yvette by l'Image à Venir, and Louis by Fonderia. And we are creating a projection with all their different works, but we also wanted to connect them in more ways than the projection. And that's why we decided to organize these online events. And they are a way for them to meet as well. So we are all meeting for the first time, and for us to exchange with them. And it's a very big pleasure. So I will leave them now the stage. So they will presenting the work that has been selected for the Versus project, but not only. In some case, like in the case of Yvette and Hélène, they are developing some connected themes, and we'll have the occasion to talk more about this new project. And in the case of Louis, we'll talk also about his publishing house, thanks to which he also published Les Affluents, which is the project presented in Versus. So Louis, I will let you talk first about your work. Thank you all for being here again.
Okay. So thank you, Rachel, for this introduction. Today I will present to you Les Affluents. It's a project I've created between 2015 were probably the earliest images created for that project, and I published it as a book form in 2019. So I'm glad this image is the first one to be shown, because it's taken in a very special place that is very meaningful for me and for the creation of this project. My family owns a wooden land, so I live in Quebec. It's a province in the east of Canada, and in the center of Quebec, approximately, we own a land which used to be for agriculture, and now it's forest. It's Laurentian forest. It's been growing for 50 years approximately, and so it's a typical centered Quebec forest in which we own little parts of it, and we built cabins there to just go out and enjoy the places. So I've been going there since I'm very young. I was a kid when my uncle built his cabin, and we went to visit him, and it was a place for being in contact with my cousin, with my family. So this place has become very special and very important for me in my in sort of personal history. And as much as it brings a lot of childhood memories, it has become a very important place for me as a grown young man when I started to work in Montreal, because now I live in Montreal, which is kind of the biggest city here. I always go back to this little village called Sainte-Hélène de Chester. It's very very small. There's not a lot of people living there, but I still go there very often since and now we go there as a larger family, since I have two kids now to bring there with my wife. So yeah, so this place is very important for me, and I think as far as I can remember, as an image maker, I've been going there to make images also. I've been going there to photograph because it's a place where I had time, where I had this sort of disponibilité, or this openness to create image. And in most of my work, I start to make images intuitively. So I create images for no specific reason else than wanting to make image, to document the thing I see, the place I go. And it's after that I create, that after looking at the image, often I can sort of find the points that relates to each other and create more general projects type of work. So I've started for a few years to create those kind of landscape. The one you see there, there was a lot of those images of forests, of waters. Some were showing more inhabited sort of landscape where you kind of felt a presence, or you could see in the landscape different details that sort of refer to a presence that was there. And I've done that for a few years, and this slide, maybe we should stay on it for just a second. No, the one with the ends, this one, yeah. At a certain point, I think in 2017 or something like that, I was looking through the images I had done, and I had not paid attention to those images, to some of those images where you could actually see people in them. And I found this specific image at that time, and I remember it was kind of a clarifying moment where I realized that there was the project I wanted to do. I wanted to talk about my connection to this place, to this landscape, but also talk about the connection that I was witnessing without realizing it. My two sons, and this is the ends of my older one, they come with me there, and the river, because the land is kind of a slopey kind of land, and it leads to a small brook. We call it the river, but it's really a brook, and we go there to sort of swim in the summer. And it's kind of the attraction point on the land. And when I saw these images, I saw that I realized that I was witnessing exactly what, through my sons, what I experienced myself as a young kid when I came there. It's there I connected. I created this connection I have now with nature, and I realized that my sons are actually going through the same process of being in contact with nature, touching waters, throwing rocks in the waters, and having this experience, this bodily experience of nature. So at that point, it was very sort of a magical moment for me, because I realized that the water was important, the connection with the landscape was important, the body and the landscape was a theme I wanted to explore more through my photograph. And at the same time, I had this word, les affluents, which in English translate to the tributaries. So les affluents, it's the fact that a smaller body of water drops into larger bodies of waters, and then they go and they advance. And for me, it was a very beautiful metaphor for our lives are leading us through the connection between us, between the family members, between our encounters with places and nature. So at that point, Les Affluents became a project where I tried to connect images of landscape, of details of nature, images of the bodies that I was photographing, sometimes on purpose. I mean, working with my kid, because it was a way to interact now with my kids that were interacting with nature. So it was a kind of the interaction with nature became an important aspect of my process, of my work, of what I aim to do as an artist, to sort of not just be looking at nature, but being in interaction with it. And so this pair of images shows two little, sometimes it was just little details, but I'm very interested in the symbolic and metaphoric potential of photograph, how they can talk to each other, and how they can they can refer to more than what they show. This pair it's nice because I think Rachel, you did this pair probably, and it's not in the pair I've done in the book, but I find there's some connection just formally, and the ends also became a motif, a very important motif, because it's through the end that you touch, you interact, you work. So that's a very specific point that I wanted to make. The title, the bodies of water, the idea of water as a motif, the idea of lines. There's a lot of lines in the series that cross, became sort of a visual motif to drive my photograph, and to drive my work in the atelier, in the workshop, how do you say atelier in English?
It is workshop.
Workshop. Well, where I work with the images, printed images, putting them next to each other. So it allowed me to go elsewhere. After that, I didn't mind. After that point, I didn't mind that the photograph I was making were not really made on that site-specific place. I took liberty to photograph elsewhere. I travel quite a bit in Quebec. I go up north, and I go in the eastern townships, and so in those places I did photograph, and I did some small intervention like this. It's just something I still do, and I can't stop doing it. It's throwing rocks in the water and photographing the result of it. Just again a sort of a reference to childhood plays that happened, and so I did take different sort of liberty in that. And this is another moment where encountering nature, finding animals and playing and having an experience of it. So I think it's a very important part of our life when we get this connection going, and it does gives us a sense of coexistence, which is, I think, an important theme for us, a sense of interrelation. Yes, and moments of it's about nature, but it's about family life, and family life near in forests. Our family and the family of my wife's have a strong connection with places in nature. So we did travel quite a bit in the forest for just pleasure, but I took the opportunity to make images.
Louis, can I ask you just a question about this specific image? Because I find it a bit different from the others. There is already the intervention of the human intervention, which is not enmeshed in the nature in the same time. In a way, like in the others, there is really an intervention. There is these objects. I find it as a presence that is unlike the others. So I was curious to know a bit about the context of this photo.
I've created this image quite a while ago at my father-in-law cabins up north, and it's a very isolated place, and he had this furniture that needed to be getting rid of, and decided to put the fire on it, and it was so big and huge and spectacular in terms of fire that got up. So I took a photograph in it, and it stayed with me for years, and I didn't know where and when to use it, and what it really brought to any project. But I found that the image, I found it has strength or power to create a reaction in the work, and it's not a planned sort of intervention in a way. It's really just documenting a moment in life. But the fire and the water, I think the idea of bringing different elements in the work was there at the start to find different elements that would sort of interact together and create some opposition. So in this case, in the book form, you have this big fire, and then you turn the page and you have this strong current of water. So I wanted to create those interaction between images. So I guess that's
Thank you. And we are the book.
And yeah, and there's a book, and so I just to make a long story short about that is that in 2012 I created Les Éditions du Renard, which is a publishing house that I've created at first to publish my own work because here in Quebec there was not a lot of opportunity, and I guess I was also looking at what it was everyone doing elsewhere, and this boom of photo book, it was present everywhere. So I decided to create my own sort of platform where I could publish my work, but also work with other artists, because there's quite a small but very dynamic community of photographers here in Quebec, and a lot of people want to do book. A lot of people are interested in books. And so it was a possibility for me to create that platform, and people got in, and I got some friends who published with me books, some of their books, and as it's limits in being distributed around the world, because but here in Quebec we get a little room for ourselves, so we create books like this, and this is the latest one we've published. It's my own work, and it's Les Affluents. So working the book was there from the start for me, because as soon as I got on the tables with the prints, I started to connect and make images, and I thought that the idea of flow was very, very much a link to the book format, the way that you encounter pages and you turn pages. So there's a sort of a sense of a narration, but also a sense of maybe more a sense of poetic resonance that happens through the images. So there's in total there was 52 images, and I find that also it's a project that can be sort of presented through some limited selection of images, but I find that I guess most artists would say that, but I guess that when you have all the image and you can go from one to the next, and you can go from the start to the end, at the end you go there to larger bodies of waters, you kind of get that feeling of going through those affluents, those tributaries that happen there. And yeah, making connection between images and in diptychs. It's pretty sober and calm book, but I think it got the form. I think I'm pretty happy with it. I think it got the form it required, it needed. And it allowed me to enter those images. There's a series of page where you just see an ant in water, or you see those repetition of body of water that flows. So a kind of cinematic possible presentation is there also. So yeah.
I really like this kind of images, and then actually I made one of them without, as you were saying,
Yeah.
and but I like how we see just a fragmented part of the body, like we never see entire body, and the nature also is often look very close by. So there is these details and water, plants, the back maybe of your child, of a child, they all become they're on the same on the same level, like visually on the sensorial level, like there is not the human and then the plant and then the landscape. Like a back can be part of this unique thing you're talking about, coexistence, which is also the main theme we use to think about ecology within our project. So they live together, they are together, they mingle, and I'll stop this share screen so we can all see each other. And I just wanted to say one thing, and then I let Yvette and Hélène maybe make a few commentaries. You talked about touch and the hand, and it's very interesting because it's something I really thought about your work, all your works in general. There is this sense of touching. And I was rereading a few things that I studied very long time ago. And in particular, I was thinking about Derrida, who was the French philosopher who wrote this very beautiful book, which is called On Touch, On Touching. That's how it's translated in English. And the connection that we can make also, that's how also I want to link it with photography, which is usually thought about as vision, donc as distance, but photography can also be contact, can also be touching, and is born from touching, from the touching of light in the film. And Derrida says that to touch, and I'm quoting him here, is to tamper with, to change, to displace, to call into question. So in the moment in which we touch, we don't just enter in contact, but we create with the world.
Yeah,
like it's more than just leaving traces or documenting traces, but it's just a poesis, a making of, and then it becomes also poetry, which is a making of words, and then is all a process of invention, of creation, as well as discovery. So I thought it was very beautiful that you talked of touching, and it's something that it could refer to all of your works, actually. Yeah. So are you saying it now? But
a word that is very present in my mind these days is resonance, resonance, and I think resonance touching is the idea of interaction of getting something and giving back in this exchange of, it goes through touch, but it can go through, I guess, many other ways. But yeah.
Touching, it implies a certain mingling, like that for a long time vision didn't. But we can also, I mean, it's all the sensing, but touching is really the body. Like I recently, my kids, my older one, she's 6 years old, and she's the one who made me rediscover going out in nature, because for a long time I was very human-made creation. So I was all about museum and cities and architecture, and this with my kids. You were talking about children, but I realized how happy we are. We are just outside, and this is thanks to them that I rediscovered it. And she really is the one who made me think about it. And she told me that her teacher told her about the different senses, so the 5 senses, and the one of touch was also the one that make us feel cold and warm. And I completely forgot about it, that our entire skin is actually a sense of touch. It's something we will go back maybe with Yvette and the octopus and with Hélène, but actually our entire body is touch, and is being in our environment and in the atmosphere, and means being together. So I thought it was like, yeah, it's true. I never thought about it in 8 years of life. And my kid made me think about it.
Yeah, true.
But I let Yvette and Hélène contribute as they want.
Well, the word I was thinking about your work, Louis, was resonance. So it's interesting that when you said that, everyone seems to be creating a resonance, even in nature, the water, the ripples in the water, or even the back of the spine, that it's all like a rippling, a very delicate rippling that has been created by that coexistence. So I think it's a really gentle approach, apart from the furniture on fire, but the other bits, it's very a gentle rippling that is very affecting.
Yeah, thank you.
And I do completely agree with you, Louis. I think we did the same experience of calling the first perception during childhood, and we call it, and then create a work and with this basis. And a friend of mine called it the infra verbal, before the language. As a child, before talking, we have this strong perception and physical of the perception of the world. And so I did the same experience with the work I will talk about later, to mind this infra verbal language.
Yeah, I think all the senses, the experience, I find it, what is my challenge, my big challenge in photography is always to talk about experience, and experience is going through all those different senses, and it's a visual medium which I'm working, so it's a tough game to be able to refer to those other senses and to make them visible. So yeah, I think now I feel like I want to work with sounds also in the future, or with other medium that will help me create those. But I'm looking forward to hear you talk about your own work, about how you do it.
Should we maybe have Hélène present her work? Yes. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I would say first, as a photographer and an artist, I'm more interested by stories and narratives, and I focus more about, I would say, the border of wilderness. Of course, this notion, wilderness, is different in North Americas and in Europe, because we don't have the same history, and we don't have the same landscapes. And but in French we will say sauvage. We will traduce this by sauvage. Even the notion is quite different. And so tonight I would like to talk about one of these stories about the border of wilderness. And its name, noces in French, it means nuptials. So I live in Marseille, in southeast of France, near the Mediterranean Sea, and I've been living there for 12 years now, and I decided to live here to be closer than the Mediterranean Sea. And it was very interesting because you talk about during your presentation about the experience as a child of the territory you photograph, and it was the same for me. I spent between the age of maybe 1 to 8. I spent a lot of time near Marseille in a place we call Calanque. So the Calanque is a kind, it's a maritime fjord, a French maritime fjord. And it's a very Mediterranean landscape. It's very dry, and with a very Mediterranean spirit, so a lot of color. a very frontal light. And so when I was a child, I spent a lot of time there, and I learned how to swim in this place. So it's something quite important in life. And then maybe 40 years after, I decided to live in Marseille, and maybe especially to, yes, remind this first perception, I think, and to spend more time on the coastline. So I invite, in a way, in some ways, I invite people and some friends, and after the readers, to explore this Mediterranean coastline and to cross this border. Those, I would say, the border between sea and land, but also in a way the border between human and non-human, between organic and maritime, and also plants. And as you said a few minutes ago, I was also interested to build a new language, a new imaginary of this place. And Raquel, you told about the fact to tell a story and to put human, non-human, and plants and elements, and maybe elements of cosmos also at the same level. And I was also in this issue, to looking for a language to tell this story, and try to find a continuation between all these topics. I mean, all this between human, animals, and yeah, and vegetables. As you see, part of this story happened underwater, and it was also the idea to follow, to cross the line again, and from land to underwater world. And this aspect was very important for me, because I think it's also the possibility to make this, because as a documentary photographer, I'm interested by the real, but also the possible sudden possibility of magical, of fantastic. And I think underwater world makes this possible. The emergence of yes, of fantastic, of invisibility, of yes, magical, and in a way of myth. So maybe, yeah, okay, we can change. And I did a few portraits in this series, but my intention was to also take portrait of non-human people. And so that's why I took this picture, and it was organized. Of course, it's a night shot, but it's also for me a portrait. And it's a very young bird, and it's a Mediterranean bird who makes his nets on the island, on Calanque Island. And this bird, after 1 year, makes a big travel all around Mediterranean Sea, and some of them, different species, travel to all Atlantic, cross the Atlantic, and then 7 years after, they come back to the island where they are born. And so I think it's also linked to our story, to come back to where do we come from, and the place where we had the first yes, perception, knowledge of the world, and the first discovering. And so this is something also about the origin and about archaism, I would say. Maybe we will talk about that later, you know. And about this picture is also linked to the idea of nuptials. Of course, nuptials is a word linked to marriage. I mean, it's night after marriage. But for me, nuptials, it's also a bridge between nature and human, and the links between them, and yes, the continuation, I would say. Or of course, in French, the term of noces, nuptials, is larger than in English, I think. You talk, Louis, about the touch, and Raquel about yes, all the sense. And of course, in this work, I try also to yeah, to use even is photography and taking pictures is first, our vision is important. But I take pictures with all my body because I dive, and also I do a lot of picture during the night and in very complex lightings. And so in a way, I don't see all what I'm doing. And I think that the body is really engaged also in the act of taking pictures. And that is very important in my work, even today with the other series I will talk about.
We can go on to it if you want.
Yeah, I just
after a bit, yeah, the book as well, because that's very interesting.
Yeah, okay. Okay. And so this story was published by Sanson Edition in France. And our intention with Céline Pévrier, the editor, was also to make the book a body. I mean, to try to create a bridge between the form and the volume. And so for us, the touching was very important also. The cover of the book is very soft. It's cotton, comes from Japan. And we did a lot of researches with the paper and the printing, and we wanted that the reader had the same experience, yes, a sensual experience in a way, and yeah.
I have another image there. Which I
yeah, yeah, and you see all the shapes on the paper. It was printed. And this is also the idea of volume, and also that people can touch the book. And this is a part of octopus. So
okay,
the creature is yeah, it's crossing all our web night.
But I discovered the work of Hélène thanks to the book. The publisher, Sanson, Céline Pévrier is the director, is based in Montpellier, where I am. And the first encounter I had with Hélène's work was through this book, which is absolutely gorgeous. Like, one wants to spend his time touching it and then going through it. And I think it's very interesting because, Louis, you were talking about the book form and this beautiful rhythm of your book, and Yvette was talking about this dropping and the sense of this water going by also with the images, I feel. And it's such a great way of imagining also the encounter of the images with the public in a different form, which is tactile. I mean, I see, as someone who loves photography, is the way I meet most of the works right now, like the paper form, the book. I often see the books before seeing the exhibition, or I never see the exhibition. Yet I spend my time looking at the books in my house.
How did you do the paper thing that we see?
On the left.
On the left, yeah, there's the relief. How is it a type of, or what is it exactly that we're looking at?
In fact, you are looking at the detail. It's not, this picture is just a detail.
Okay.
I show the next one. Maybe will I?
Okay, yeah, like this. What is it exactly? How do you do that?
It's in Paris. There is a workshop, and people they do this kind of we call it embossage
Embossage.
in French. It means they use something to press the paper.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And, create a volume in the paper. It was for the editor. It was very complex because it doesn't work first time, and it means a research. So it means also an economic aspect. This book was quite expensive, actually, but we did it. We knew that there was an economic risk to do that because it was more expensive than normal printing. But I think the experience was at the end was good for us because the reader did also new experience with this tactile aspect, and and it was part of the success of the book.
I'm going back to this one, and you're continuing to work with Sansan for the next project, if I understood correctly. Yes. So we can show a bit about it, maybe, so then we can discover more.
Good team. I don't know if Céline is watching us, but yes, I think we do. We were really interested to go further on this experience, on this editing experience. So now I'm working on another project. So it's a research. This project starts with two other artists. No, actually one writer and anthropologist. And it was also, we work for a local institution, Department of Archives here in the area where I live. And so at the beginning, the project is a big collect of documents. So both contemporary photography, but also archives. I'll give you an example. The archive here starts in 8,000 to nowadays. So it's a very long period, all the Middle Age. And we focus on the relationship between human and non-human, most animals and humans here in our area. And so the purpose was to write a story through all these documents, so through time and also space, and to find a language with written documents, archives, contemporary photography also. And so there are right now an exhibition in Marseille in a big wall, a long wall, and this wall was inspired by, in a way, by
that it is
cave, yes. And so it's a 65 meters story, and it was a bit inspired by a wall cave painting. This idea of a lot of elements telling a story together. With a lot of information, a lot of sign, and also, of course, a very sensitive approach and a poetic approach through all this story.
And going back to some of the images.
Yeah. So the exhibition is just one step in, I would say, in the project. It's very collective and participating aspect. But now I would like to go on this research and also with contemporary photography, and for a new book with Céline Perreault, my editor, and it will be the second part of this research about borders of wilderness also, but we talk about more. It would talk about animal parts inside us and outside us. So, and I would say this animal part, it comes from, it begins with grace, but it can go until fear. And yeah, between fear and fascination. And for me, the most important maybe is to imagine or to search a new imaginary of our relationship with animals today, nowadays.
I think maybe we can exchange a bit about it.
Yvette?
I know that Yvette also, yes, thinks about some of these topics, so I let you exchange a bit, maybe.
Well, I was just thinking, I don't know if you've read Staying with the Trouble by Donna Haraway.
I have my notes here about Haraway.
It's my studio mate's book, but I recommend it as a way of thinking about exactly what you're saying, how we've separated ourselves from animals and nature, or like Timothy Morton and the dark ecology, this romantic view, whereas, you know, we're within nature, so we need to think in those boundaries rather than thinking of it as something as apart, I suppose. Yeah, just exactly what you're saying there. It's interesting that all the philosophical thinking around it these days is coming to the same conclusion, away from the romantic idea that we look at nature in, you know, museums and boxes or framed things. But it's kind of got us to where we are now, you know, which is a lot of trouble, really. And thinking ourselves as separate and one controlling the other.
There is the book Before Staying with the Trouble, which I read just in bits and pieces, and they made me think also about a lot about your works. We will discover more about Yvette, which is called When Species Meet. And there she talks a lot about the animal specifically, and about this becoming together. And she talks about this becoming worldly, to be part of the world, and it's something that is related to the animal, but I think it can relate also to Louise' world, this being part of the world. And it's interesting because at some stage she's saying that we should stop making generalities and talking like with this big philosophical distant approach to the world. But she's saying, I'm a creature of mud. So I was thinking about your sheep covered in mud, your image, Hélène, which we just seen, about being in the mud. And she says something that I really love, and I think it can be interesting for thinking about photography in general, but with this topic of ecological thought in particular, which about the look and how we look at each other and we respond to each other. And the encounter is always one of responsibility as well. In the moment in which we look at each other and we assume that the other one is responsive, and there is a dialogue, there is also an element also of responsibility. So I found this very interesting when thinking about the relation to the other, in this case, the no human animal other.
And Donna, she describes also when we meet other species, I mean, other non-human animals, I would say, how we look at each other. And she talks about the experience of respectare. And it was really amazing because in my notes, I copy what she's saying, and I really did this experience with sheep when I entered the first time in the bergerie, the place where sheep.
There is a sheep farm, a sheep stable.
And I really did this experience because they all turned to me, and it was not all the sheep; it was one and another and another, and each one was looking at me, and I was really like their eyes and their look go went through me, you see? And also Derrida is also talking about that, about how the relation with animal, but it's opening a door inside you. It's opening, it's deep, I mean. So I think we are talking about the same since the beginning.
But I mean, there are a lot of meeting of questions, and you were talking also about the creation of possible words. It's something that Yvette also thought about it, and this process of fabulation of poetry as well. I mean, poetry is the storytelling, is the opening of words of possibility. And these days I was reading this one, Vinciane Desprez, who is a collaborator also of Donna Haraway, inspired by your works. and she's talking about this expression of animals and the possibility of, maybe we can say, a language, even if usually we associate language with humans, but this subversive play of expressions that animals have, and this idea of always imagining new words, always imagining new possibilities of encounter. And it's also something that I feel very connects with all your works.
Yes, and also animals teach us the way to be in the world. Linked with new perception, act with body, act with all our senses. Smelling is very important in the animal world, for example. It's less important for us. Gesture, the language with gesture, and that we found that also, for example, in dancing, contemporary dancing, and because I practice also contemporary dancing, and animals are a big source of inspiration to try to find the, we would say in French, corporeité. It means the body of animals, to find this new way of moving, of being in the world.
Corporality, maybe, that? Does
Yes,
it exist in English?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not like a random translation, like picking up new words. Okay. But maybe we pass on to Yvette's work. Louis, you maybe want to say something?
No, I find it very interesting because it's also for me, it has been a question of thinking about les éditions du renard. When I created this, is because I did a project earlier which I called Sur la trace du renard, and one of the question was, how would animals see in the forest, so you can take their point of view. So I find that there's a lot of thing you can take from the animal experience and try to integrate it in your own world, opening your possible modes of encountering the world. So I think the dance and the movement is another aspect that I didn't think about, but it's certainly an interesting point there.
Yeah, and it takes also you were talking about sound, like usually we dance to sound, so it's when the senses on the hearing and the music comes over. But on the animal traces, I don't know if you read, there is this great philosopher called Baptiste Morisot, who works on wolves. Well, not just on wolves, but he's a pisteur, we say in French. Well, pisteur, you understand, but he's a tracker.
Yes.
So he goes tracking animals, and is describing this art, let's say, of paying attention to details, to traces, to other forms of language. And he's talking about smell, he's talking about hearing, because the wolves are not seeing, and about this diplomacy of coexisting and living in the same world that animals have. As Hélène was saying, we can learn a lot from them. And he talks really about traces and wolves and animals in the night, and it's very great, and he does it himself. So Hélène was saying, I go deep underwater. You are in these natural spaces with your family and your kids. So it's about really inhabiting and being inhabited as well. So being in these spaces. So he's a very great singer as well. So I let Yvette talk and share a bit her work as well.
Great, so thank you so much. The work here, the time of dreaming the world awake, I started this in 2011, so nearly 10 years ago. But this date was important because, and it's not this picture, but basically it was a story around a mountain called Bucharest, which is just south of Carcassonne in France, in southern France. But there was a Mayan prophecy that the world as we know it was to end on the 21st of December 2012. So it's still unclear as to how the Mayan prophecy was connected to Bucharest, the mountain in France, but it was. So I was there in 2010 and I heard this story, and there was kind of heat around the area for that reason. But when I went there, for me, it felt very much like a place, like an Arcadia, or a kind of, a very place of the sublime. So I wanted to go back there and make some work around this, and less about this kind of sensationalist story, but really around like how a landscape can be a landscape of possibility. And I photographed the year leading, a full calendar year leading up to that date. And it was really to see if how you capture visually a landscape, like an atmosphere in a landscape or a charge. So yeah, it was meant to be the last bastion of salvation, or else it was meant to be the last place completely. So yeah, there were differing thoughts on what it was meant to be, but that wasn't really what was of interest. It was more this idea that there was something in the landscape that was kind of building, but also this place itself was very otherworldly, and a lot of history had happened there. There was a lot of mythology and legends associated with this very small rural place, and so that's what brought me to it. And I suppose, there was probably a time when the material world felt brittle. Probably feels a bit more brittle now, though. This is at this point, but at that point, I think the attraction to kind of this natural idyll was very attractive, and been pulled into this Arcadia. So I actually undertook a master's in photography as a way to frame this work and to kind of use it as guidance. And one of my lecturers there is a guy called Donovan Wiley, and he said to me, only photograph when you feel moved to. I think before I tended to make lists or, photograph things that I thought were, interesting ideas or metaphors, but, they would just be too heavy-handed if it approached it in that way. So it really changed my practice, in that this intuitive way was very much kind of, engaging the intuition. You go from your mind into your body, so you're very much feeling the place rather than thinking about the place. And I also use Carl Jung's idea of synchronicity, just looking for meaningful coincidences, again, as a way to kind of like a detective, inch my way through this work and find meaningful coincidences that would tie it together. And I suppose another thing that I was doing was, really immersing myself in the landscape physically. So walking and swimming in all the water bodies and the rivers. There was hot water geysers there, and doing that every day. And so that feeling the landscape as much as viewing it. And then I suppose looking at people, it was very much a living landscape. So I was looking at the intimacy of people in nature and in this landscape, and people seem to embody kind of the stories that came from this place, this as a fantastical place, almost as mythical characters even. And I looked at people like Caspar David Friedrich, how he painted people experiencing the sublime, and then also Claire Richardson, Beyond the Forest. I don't know if you know that work, but she just created such a beautiful book based on a real place, but creating a fable fable from a real story. And so, yeah, it wasn't a documentary by any means, but what I was trying to do was suggest a story, because I suppose I was looking to document things that were kind of a bit mystical or shrouded in mystery or intangible. So I'm trying to document the impossible things to document, and yeah, tell that story visually rather than these kind of stories that are usually passed on orally.
Can I ask you a question? I had the curiosity because I discovered just 10 days ago during one of our previous meetings that one of the works that you are presenting, the one by Léa Bourdin, the survivalist, which was originally about the survivalist movement, which originated from the fear of the end of the world, often caused by climate crisis now. But actually, the origin of the idea was really the same prophecy that inspired your work. So that was a very beautiful, and we're talking about coincidences and synergy. So that was a nice coincidence. And she was talking about this community of survivalists that then turned a bit right-wing and extreme. And I was more curious about the community you photographed there. I mean, who are these people?
Yeah, so I suppose there were lots of different people, and there was lots of different types.
We can tell.
Yeah, so they weren't of a particular community. I mean, definitely
okay.
People, some of them were just living rurally as farmers, or some people were living in yurts, and one guy was living in a cave, so there was very different types of people there for different reasons. So I suppose I was more looking at the people as kind of people you made a connection with, but also that kind of helped tell a story of a mythical place. Okay. Rather than kind of documenting a specific community of like where they lived and what they were up to, but it was more about people living in a landscape and waiting, and a landscape that's charged. So how are those people in the landscape? So the landscape is bigger than them, and they're part of it.
Thank you so much. And then your newest work.
This was in 2018, I think it started. And really this came about because my close friend who I share the studio with, Rosie, who was here earlier, she is the one who got me interested in octopuses, because she was doing a residency in Porto in Seymour, and one of the scientists there told her that cephalopods or octopuses have been upgraded from invertebrates to mammals. So then we started having discussion around octopuses, and especially around Peter Godfrey Smith's book, which is Other Minds, about the consciousness of an octopus. And he studied octopuses in the wild in a place called Octopolis, which is off the east coast of Australia. And I think this was kind of the first time it was properly documented by an evolutionary biologist, their behavior in the wild rather than in a lab. And I suppose through his research, he proved that octopuses have subjective experiences. So down to things like, building houses with, build these little houses with roofs on them, and one octopus pulled a sheet of perspex over it and made a little sunroof, for his house. So I don't think they knew the extent of the intelligence of an octopus, because up until I have this book by Jacques Cousteau, which was my dad's, and up until Jacques Cousteau dived with octopuses, they were seen as creatures of doom from the depths. In Victor Hugo, they were literally they were saying they were drinking their victims, so they were seen as something to be terrified of. So it's only now that people are coming to realize just how intelligent they are, and this is down to their neurons. They're have something like 500 million neurons, which is the same as, say, a 3-year-old child, but the neurons are dispersed throughout their body. So it's like they have 9 brains, like one brain and then 8 tentacles. So they can also taste, and their taste would be 100 times greater than ours. So they can taste and feel through their arms, almost independent of the brain, but it means that their thinking is through their body. So exactly what we were talking about earlier. And I suppose this has influenced people like Donna Haraway to think about this idea that we should be learning to think tentacularly like an octopus, and as a way to go forward, when she talks about the Thylacine, that, we need new ways to think. So something like the octopus, it's not thinking, it's thinking through its whole body. And again, Godfrey Smith is talking about in Octopolis, one of his diving mates was taken on a tour around the site by this octopus, took him, like hooked him by the arm and brought him to show him his house. But they were saying, sometimes they can be doing something with one tentacle, but the other side of the tentacles won't know about it, so they're not independent of each other. And also octopuses can feel pain and even emotional pain. They've seen them nursing wounds. And again, that changes our perception of, how we view them. Because if they're experiencing emotional pain by things we're doing to them, like for example, studying them in a laboratory, and so like the image of the eye there, their eyes are very sensitive to light. So there was a case in New Zealand in a lab where the octopus was caught spraying water at a light bulb to switch it off because it was really annoying him or her. And so it just shows not only are they aware of their environment, but they're able to use it and manipulate it. And I suppose from a evolutionary biology point of view, when the tree started, like cephalopods went that way and everything else went that way. So they say that they're the closest living thing we have to a living alien on Earth, which is quite like phenomenal, really, to think about. And they've got this amazing intelligence, and yet they have a very short lifespan. So again, an anomaly in terms of evolutionary biology. But so
it's a very peculiar encounter. And what about, like, how did you decide to photograph really this octopus? Because you see these very close up images, like that. It's very tactile, as we say again. You are not giving at all. There is movement. You're not. It's completely different from what we imagine as a documentary image of an octopus. So how did that happen? How did you approach this subject with all this reading as well as interest behind it?
Yeah, now my friend Rosie wrote the essay. She did most of the we definitely, the Godfrey Smith book is fantastic. But so the way I photographed it was really due to circumstance, because the only octopus I could find was in an aquarium in Bray, which is just south of Dublin, and the tank was very small. And the lighting was really bad, and it was really dark in that place, and there was a big exit sign behind it. So for some of the images, the only thing I could do was kind of crop into them. And then on one visit, I got my friend and my husband to hold up some black cloth when there was no visitors coming by, to hold it up behind so that I could photograph. And obviously I couldn't use lights because it would affect the octopus. But, we kind of got to know each other a little bit, myself and the octopus. But a lot of the time he would just be stuck to the side, to the glass, and he wouldn't move for a long time. So that was generally our visits. And say this one, he did take off because you see these two balls, they're full of his lunch. So he was ready to, they can manipulate tools as well, or they can use tools, so they'd kind of play with them and get the food out of them. So that's, again, cropped into like a much larger image, just because there was so many distracting things. So there was no way you could get like a National Geographic color, beautiful image in there.
But I mean, I find it extremely beautiful as well. It's just another way of encountering it as a spectator, as meeting the octopus, and there is this
we were going
this movement,
like ideas, so we didn't want to look at it like a National Geographic thing, because we were trying to think about things like all of those issues that we've talked about, like dark ecology and
And I put some images here of the exhibition you had in Belfast for the festival, because I found it very interesting and striking the fact that both works, yours and Hélène, were shown in the city in such a large space and invaded in a good way, like an alien, a good alien, the urban environment. So both of them were in highly urbanized spaces, in big size. So like the scale is completely modified. and the scale to the spectator as well. I found it quite beautiful. I mean, Marseille, I still have time to see it. This one I didn't, but I would have liked to.
Well,
I think
I didn't see this either because we were locked down, so I couldn't get.
You couldn't get there.
Yeah.
So I'll stop sharing the screen, so maybe we can exchange a bit. I'm sure you have a lot to say, Louis and Hélène, about all of this.
For me, I want to go back to the first project you've shown because they're so different, both of them. It seems like you've taken a shift in your practice, or I wonder that's the question, how you got from one to the other. But I want to talk about the first one because I think there's a lot of striking portraits in there. It's a lot of beautiful image. I really enjoyed looking at it, discovering it, and for me, it got to an idea that I've been thinking about for a long time, is how to make a work that is happening in place. It's not about the place, it's about to be in the place. And I felt you had this kind of you described that a little bit. You wanted to be embodied in place to photograph it. But do you think it's possible to create a work that is not about the place, but it's a work that's being done in place? I don't know if you see the nuance there, or how you approach that. I think you said you project a lot of your interpretation of this myth, the story in the place. So you kind of created that story out of this place, which it's not necessarily linked to the story. How much it's linked specifically to the story you're telling me?
Yeah, so I think I understand what you're saying. I think, by using this intuitive approach, it's really only in the edit that you start making those choices,
Yeah.
what works and how you start putting it together. But there wasn't that much time, so I didn't go into all of the history and stories and myths that were related to that place, but there's they found the bones of dinosaurs and giants, and
Okay.
there were Cathars that were all people that were burnt at the stake in the 12th century, and there were their castles on the hilltops.
Okay.
Steven Spielberg was influenced to make Close Encounters of the Third Kind by Bucharest, and there was the Da Vinci Code is connected back to that area. That's probably the most popular story around there. So there's so many different aspects. So I suppose I was trying to suggest stories more than tell a specific story. So just allude, and then as well really give an atmosphere or create an atmosphere that allows you bring your own idea to it, so almost like a children's book or something that you could make up stories as you go along, because there's enough there to do it, but then without dictating a meaning specifically like a traditional documentary. So.
Yeah. Can I you say the beautiful word, which is atmosphere, and just last week I was reading a book by Tim Ingold, and I know his work a bit because he works in Aberdeen in Scotland, where I studied for 10 years, even if not with him because he was in the anthropology department, but obviously he's very influential there. And he was talking about atmosphere and about this work, when we often think it in a way of creating an atmosphere, like when creating artwork is something we are creating, we are making, but actually we are immersed in the atmosphere. And that made related to what you said, Louis, about being within the environment and photographing as someone who is within. So I was really thinking about this atmosphere and the fact that we are in the air, we are in the space, we are in the meteorological condition even. And so atmosphere as within the world itself, this aspect of it being embedded, even if we usually talk about this as creation of on an aura or something, but this aura is about the experience of being there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with regards to the change in the style of work, yeah, it was pretty much a U-turn there. But I did two pieces of work around landscape and memory. So the time of dreaming the world awake, and then another one called the 1,000-Year-Old Boy. And then I had a daughter. So we had our daughter in 2016, and I don't know, after that everything just changed quite a lot internally and externally. So you know, the first image in the octopus series, I started, you know, making holes and some interventions on the print, and then, you know, that's the way my practice has gone since then. Really, you know, looking at the print, and also going a lot more into the internal space to look at that, you know. And but the octopus work also came up as an opportunity because I was asked to do some work for a book called Winter Papers here in Ireland. It's an arts anthology, and they print in black and white, and all my work was shot on medium format film. So I didn't want, nothing worked, you know, when you converted it to black and white. So I wanted to shoot something specifically black and white, but I always just go after the thing that I'm the most interested in at the time, and at that time it was octopuses. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. It seems like it moved to a more material. The materiality of the print of the photograph became important in that the second project.
Yeah, and then I moved to more like drawing and a bit of painting stuff. So to kind of exploring through different materiality.
Yeah, interesting.
I have also a question, well, to all of you, kind of, because you were talking about the presence of water near this mythical mountain. It's in our region, actually. Yeah, it's 1 hour from Montpellier, but I never been. I discovered it thanks to your work. And there is this presence of water, and obviously the octopus is in water. And Hélène was talking about scuba diving and the presence of water in her work, and Louis as well. So I wanted to ask you a bit, because I mean, I find it is a strong presence in your works. Mm-hmm. Or maybe I see it, but I see it also as a link, as between it, that I realized as you were talking.
Yes. I don't know, but I think for me it's an attraction point. There's something about water that the continuous movement. I think it's this movement and in versus our sort of immobility sometimes. So we might be attracted by that. But I thought, hearing all of the projects, I thought you did that on purpose, you know, linking us together.
I did that on purpose, but for many reasons, but water was not one of them. I just felt resonances between all your work and this process of fabulation and being within the landscape. And then I discovered afterwards Hélène's work, and I realized that really connected with the new ones of Yvette's, but no, water was not one of them. But I realized there is a presence of this element, which is one of a primary element, one that is often unknown. As Hélène was saying, going into water is going into something that is a bit alien to us, because we are terrestrial animals, a bit. But we are born in water.
Also,
I mean,
it's that, and also it's familiar.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the first element.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised, even if you didn't it on purpose, I'm not surprised that all of three of us, we are working on we would say nature, I don't like this term, but nature or wilderness or what is alive. And water is one of is essential, is one of the most important element in all this combination. So I'm not surprised that all of us will work through this element at different level. Yeah. But I think it's maybe for me it's a fascination to underwater world and sea, to being at sea is both familiar, is both, I would say, archaic from a very long time ago, and also it's very strange. It's experience of strangeness, being at sea or underwater. And I don't dive anymore with I free dive I don't dive anymore with all the stuff. I don't want to do that anymore because free diving makes you make a connection. What you say, Louis? Connection very different to the element. You can make the experience of being inside, being a part of. And maybe if I can make the link with atmosphere, I'm wondering if the key of the atmosphere is to try to find, to be inside the landscape, inside the place. And so to find all the possible link, to ask the question of border between us and between the outside. And of course, when you free dive, you make the experience. It's like a meditation, for example. You make the experience of going further than the border to enlarge your body, enlarge your world.
It's true that these borders are, or this being within an environment and being with the other. I think when you are inside water is clearer because you are already in air, you're already in the atmosphere, but we don't feel it. Whatever, we feel it strongly when we are underwater. Like we feel the weight of it as well. Like physically, we feel it.
It's also the experience of being. Yes, your body is not what's the word in English? I don't remember.
Tu peux le dire en français? You want to say in French?
C'est l'expérience de l'apesanteur.
The experience of presence. No?
Not present. Apesanteur is the weight.
Oui, or the weight.
Weightlessness.
Yeah, weightless. Okay, yes.
Weightlessness.
Yes, true. Louis is even better than me because he really lives between English and French.
It's part of this experience of changing of perception and what is your place in the element, in the environment. Yeah.
And I was thinking right now that also when you are in water, also you see, you were talking really about moving water, and then in water, when you are in water, you see the effect of your movements and your presence very clearly. Always, everything you do influences everything that is around you. Every smallest movement as a wave, causes something, it has a repercussion, is a vibration that expands, but it becomes extremely clear in water. So I think it makes the interconnection evident visually as well.
Yes, visually, and the experience. I don't dive like you do, Hélène, but I hear you talking about diving, and I know that this feeling of being underwater and changing perception. And I think what I experience in the river, for instance, is when you see the body flowing and you feel it hitting you and continuing. I think this it makes you shift. It makes you shift your perception and knowing that things move, and the contrast between the water and our own experience. I think it's what attracts me personally to water, but it's certainly an endless kind of potential with water, and it's
Well, I just want to say a few things about our next meeting, if you can bear with me 2 seconds, which is gonna be the last one. So it's gonna be in English as well. So we had 2 meetings in French and 2 meetings in English. And it's gonna be the 4th of May, again at 18:30. With a few nationalities, again, mixed. So Marina Caneve, who is Italian, Céline Clanet, French, and Jan Stratman, who is German. They already also work together in a project called Calamita, and they're all very interested in landscape, among many other things. So I'm looking forward to chatting with them as well as I did with you. And I want to say thank you so much. It was incredibly interesting and very, very rich. If it was for me, I would keep talking with you for the next 3 hours. I hope we will have the occasion. And thanks so much, really, for accepting to participate.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to you. Bye-bye.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Yes.